I had been driving for what felt like forever, 2 hours at least, heading toward the Marriott in Baltimore. My wife, Emily, was attending a conference there, and I thought a surprise dinner would be a nice gesture. But, deep down, I had a much more pressing reason for the trip. For the past 3 months, I couldn't shake the feeling that Emily was seeing someone else. Every time she went on one of these work trips, she came back later than expected, offering flimsy excuses. Tonight, I was determined to get to the truth, no matter what it would cost me. Emily and I had been married for 14 years. We had 2 kids, Anna, 12, and Ethan, 10, both staying with my mom for the night. We tied the knot right out of high school after dating for a few years. Emily had always been the bright, bubbly woman with flowing brown hair and a figure that turned heads. But a few months ago, something changed. She became distant, secretive, and I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I didn't want to come off as paranoid, so I kept my concerns to myself until now. This conference was conveniently close, so it gave me the perfect excuse to drop by. I pulled into the hotel parking lot, my stomach churning with dread. After checking in, I headed to the front desk and introduced myself as Ryan Edwards. My wife, Emily, is attending the insurance conference here. She's staying in room 214 and said I could grab a key from the front desk, I said, trying to sound casual. The clerk verified my ID and handed me the key. My heart raced as I made my way to the elevator, running through all the scenarios in my head. What would I do if I caught her? How would I handle it? Was she alone? Every step closer to her room felt heavier. I decided not to knock. Sliding the key card into the door, I pushed it open quietly. There she was, sitting at the desk, looking over some paperwork. Emily spun around, surprised to see me. "Ryan, what are you doing here?" she asked, a smile spreading across her face. I covered quickly, telling her I had some free time and thought I'd surprise her with dinner. She seemed genuinely happy to see me, walking over to give me a kiss. She suggested I stay the night and, with a sly grin, hinted that we could enjoy some alone time before heading to dinner. I laughed nervously, trying to shake off the paranoia that had been gnawing at me. Maybe I had overreacted? We shared a brief, intimate moment before she excused herself to take a shower. As she disappeared into the bathroom, I let out a long breath, trying to calm the storm of thoughts in my head. My eyes drifted to her toiletry bag on the dresser. Something nagged at me, so I unzipped it, pretending to look for some aspirin. Instead, I found something that made my stomach drop, a diamond bracelet, tucked away in a small velvet pouch. I hadn't given her any jewelry recently. A million thoughts raced through my head. Where did it come from? Who gave it to her? Without thinking, I slipped the bracelet into my pocket. I didn't know why I took it. Maybe it was my way of taking back control. Maybe I just wanted to confront her with it later, on my terms. By the time Emily came out of the bathroom, her hair still damp from the shower, I had already slipped the bracelet into my coat pocket. She smiled, walking over in her robe. "You okay? You seem a little distant," she asked, concern in her voice. I forced a smile, though my stomach was still in knots. "Yeah, just tired from the drive," I lied, trying to keep my cool. Emily suggested we head down to the hotel restaurant for dinner. I agreed, despite my mind swirling with suspicions. How long had she had that bracelet? Who gave it to her? My pulse quickened just thinking about it, but I swallowed my anger for now. As we sat down in the dimly lit dining room, Emily ordered a glass of rose and a small filet mignon. I picked at my food, unable to focus on anything but that velvet pouch I had found. Every glance she threw my way made my blood boil. How could she sit there, smiling, pretending everything was fine when she was hiding something from me? Halfway through the meal, I couldn't resist testing the waters. "So, you've been happy with our marriage, right?" I asked, trying to sound casual. Without missing a beat, Emily smiled and nodded. "Of course. We've got a great life, 2 wonderful kids, and I love you, Ryan." I couldn't ask for more. She said it so convincingly that, for a brief moment, I almost believed her. But then I remembered the bracelet, and her words felt like a knife in my chest. How could she lie to my face like that? My phone buzzed right on cue. It was Mike, my buddy, calling with the emergency I had planned. I excused myself from the table, stepping into the lobby to take the call. Yeah, what's up? I answered, playing along. Mike stuck to the script. Burst pipe at the school, buddy. Gotta get back home. Thanks, Mike. I'll handle it, I replied, hanging up. I took a deep breath before heading back to the table. When I returned, I told Emily I had to leave. Something urgent had come up. Her face fell, but I couldn't tell if she was disappointed or just annoyed. Either way, I didn't care. I just wanted out. As we walked back toward the elevator, a man I didn't recognize stepped out and greeted Emily with a little too much familiarity. Emily, good to see you again, he said, flashing a smile. I stopped by earlier, but you weren't in. My heart sank. This was him, wasn't it? The guy she was seeing behind my back. Emily introduced him as Tom Bradley, one of her colleagues from work. Ryan, this is Tom. Tom, this is my husband, Ryan, she said, as if everything was perfectly normal. I forced a smile, shaking Tom's hand, though inside, I wanted to punch him. As we rode up in the elevator, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just come face to face with the man who was wrecking my marriage. When we got back to the room, I didn't waste any time. Emily, I need you to quit your job, I said flatly. I can't stand the idea of you working with Tom anymore. She looked at me like I'd lost my mind. What are you talking about? She snapped, her voice tight with frustration. You're being paranoid. I wasn't backing down. Quit your job or we're done, I said coldly. Her eyes flashed with anger. I'm not quitting my job, Ryan. I've told you before, you need to get over this. Tom is just a colleague. You're acting ridiculous. I didn't argue further. I had something up my sleeve. After a quick, icy exchange, I grabbed my bag and left the room. I couldn't even look at her anymore. As I drove home, my mind raced with thoughts of the bracelet in my pocket. I didn't know what I was going to do with it yet, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. The next couple of days were hell. Emily came back from the conference acting as if everything was perfectly normal, like nothing had happened. She was cheerful, almost annoyingly so. Meanwhile, I was barely holding it together. Every time I looked at her, I saw the bracelet in my mind, the evidence of her lies. It was a constant reminder of what she was doing behind my back. While she was unpacking, I couldn't resist checking her bag again, hoping to find more clues. Sure enough, there was another piece of jewelry. This time, a gold necklace that I'd never seen before. My heart pounded in my chest as I took it. It was clear now. Someone was spoiling her, someone who wasn't me. I slipped the necklace into my pocket, just like I had with the bracelet. I wasn't sure what I was going to do with it yet, but knowing I had it gave me some sense of control. Emily didn't even notice it was gone. She carried on with her day, oblivious to the fact that I had started to dismantle her little secret life, piece by piece. That weekend, Liberty Insurance, the company Emily worked for, hosted a picnic for employees and their families. The kids were excited about it, but I was dreading every minute. I had a sinking feeling that some of her colleagues knew about the affair. The idea of being the clueless husband, the butt of office gossip, made my skin crawl. Emily was in her element at the picnic, laughing and chatting with her coworkers, including Tom. They weren't openly affectionate, but there was something about the way they interacted, like they had their own private world. Every time I saw them together, my stomach turned. I kept a low profile, trying not to draw attention to myself. That's when a woman approached me, introducing herself as Janet Bradley, Tom's wife. She was stunning, with long auburn hair and piercing blue eyes, the kind of beauty that made heads turn. For a moment, I was stunned. How could Tom cheat on a woman like Janet? She was gorgeous, far more than Emily ever was. We exchanged pleasantries, but it was clear she had something more on her mind. After a few minutes of small talk, Janet and I wandered away from the crowd, finding a quiet spot by the lake. She hesitated, clearly struggling to say what was on her mind. I decided to make it easier for her. I know, I said quietly, meeting her eyes. I know about them. Her relief was immediate. She sighed, her shoulders relaxing. I found out 2 months ago, she admitted. I've already started filing for divorce. I even hired a private investigator. The words hit me hard. There it was, confirmation of everything I had suspected. It wasn't just paranoia. Emily was really having an affair with Tom. Janet went on to explain that her lawyer had suggested asking Emily to testify or at least sign a notarized statement about the affair to help her case. She even offered to share some of the evidence she had gathered with me. What kind of evidence? I asked, my heart racing. Photos, phone calls, text messages, Janet sighed. I've got enough to make a solid case. Hearing her say that gave me a strange sense of relief. I wasn't crazy. It was all real. Emily was cheating on me, and now I had a chance to do something about it. We agreed to stay in touch and help each other where we could. Before we headed back to the picnic, Janet invited me over to her house the next day to go over everything she'd gathered. Tom's going golfing tomorrow morning, she said. It'll be a good time to talk. We both laughed, knowing it wasn't a date, but more like a support group for the betrayed. When we got back to the crowd, no one seemed to notice we had been gone. Emily was still lost in conversation with her coworkers, oblivious to the fact that her carefully constructed world was starting to crumble. The next morning, Emily told me she was going out to do some shopping and would be gone for a few hours. As soon as she left, I dropped the kids off at my mom's place and drove over to Janet's. Janet greeted me at the door, as composed as ever, and led me inside. Her house was cozy, with soft lighting and a large living room. You're going to want to see this, she said, gesturing toward a stack of files on the coffee table. Before I could ask any questions, she handed me a folder filled with photos. Clear, undeniable evidence of Emily's affair with Tom. It was like a punch to the gut. Janet sat across from me, watching as I flipped through the photos. Each image was a punch to the gut. There was Emily, my wife, in the arms of another man, Tom. They were at the motel, their intimacy clear in the pictures. The evidence was undeniable. I've got more, Janet said softly, handing me a USB drive. Phone conversations, text messages, everything. I stared at the USB drive in my hand, feeling the weight of the situation fully settle on my shoulders. There was no turning back now. This was the proof I needed, proof of Emily's betrayal. Thanks, I muttered, my voice rough. I don't even know what to say, Janet sighed, leaning back in her chair. We're in the same boat, Ryan. I'm just as blindsided by all of this as you are. We sat in silence for a moment, the heaviness of the situation hanging between us. Then, Janet broke the silence with a surprising suggestion. Listen, I don't know what you're planning to do with all of this, but I've got a lawyer who's ready to tear Tom apart in court. If you want, I can put you in touch with him. We can work together. I considered her offer. A part of me wanted to go through with it, to destroy Emily and Tom just as they had destroyed me. But another part of me wanted something else. Revenge on my terms. I'll think about it, I said, slipping the USB drive into my pocket. But I'm not sure I want to go through the courts just yet. Janet nodded, understanding. Take your time. But if you ever need help, you know where to find me. We spent the next hour talking about our respective situations, but it was clear both of us were looking for ways to move forward. Before I left, Janet mentioned that Tom was going on another golf outing next weekend. If you're still interested in gathering more evidence, we could keep an eye on them, she said with a small smile. You never know what might turn up. I agreed to stay in touch, thanking her for her support. On the drive home, I couldn't stop thinking about the photos and the USB drive sitting in my pocket. It felt like a bomb waiting to go off, and I was holding the detonator. As soon as I got home, I checked my phone. Emily had texted, asking how my day had been. She was still out shopping, playing the part of the devoted wife. I didn't reply. Instead, I slipped into our bedroom, opened her jewelry box, and took another piece. This time, a delicate gold ring she always wore on special occasions. I didn't know what I was going to do with all the things I'd taken. The bracelet, the necklace, the ring. But knowing I had them gave me a twisted sense of satisfaction. It was as if, by taking her possessions, I was reclaiming pieces of my life she had stolen with her lies. Later that evening, Emily came home, acting like everything was fine. She kissed me on the cheek, chatting about the sales at the mall. I played along, smiling and nodding, even though inside I was seething. We went to bed that night, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those photos of Emily and Tom together. The rage and betrayal boiled in my chest, threatening to explode. The next morning, I knew I couldn't keep it inside any longer. I had to confront her, but I needed to do it on my terms. So, I waited for the right moment. That evening, after the kids were in bed, I asked Emily if we could talk privately in the kitchen. She seemed a little surprised but followed me in, closing the door behind her. "What's going on, Ryan?" she asked, sensing something was off. "I didn't waste any time. I want you to quit your job and end things with Tom Bradley. I'm done pretending like I don't know what's happening." Emily's face hardened. "I'm not quitting my job," she snapped, crossing her arms. "And I've already told you, there's nothing going on between me and Tom." I shook my head, pulling the bracelet and necklace from my pocket and placing them on the table. "Really? Then what's this? Who gave you these, Emily?" Her eyes flicked to the jewelry, then back to me, but she didn't say a word. "I'm done, Emily. I know everything. I know about you and Tom," I said, my voice low and steady. "I've got proof. Photos, recordings, everything." For the first time, I saw real fear flash across her face. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out. "I've been taking things from you for weeks," I continued, "piece by piece. You haven't even noticed, have you? That's how much you care about this marriage." Her face went pale, and for a moment, I thought she might collapse. But instead of breaking down, she lashed out. "You've been spying on me? You're the one who's sick. You think taking a few pieces of jewelry is going to fix this?" I stayed calm, not letting her anger affect me. "No, Emily, it's not going to fix anything. But it's going to give me some peace." Emily was furious, but I didn't care. For the first time in months, I felt like I had control over the situation, even if it was just by taking a few of her things. She had stolen so much more from me. My trust, my love, the life we had built together. Taking back these small pieces felt like the only way to regain some sense of balance. She glared at me, her fists clenched. "You think this is some kind of game, Ryan? What the hell do you want from me?" "I want you to quit your job," I repeated, my voice steady. "I want you to end it with Tom. If you don't, then I'm filing for divorce." Her eyes narrowed. "You can't be serious. You're going to throw away 14 years of marriage over your paranoia?" "It's not paranoia, Emily. I've seen the pictures. I've heard the recordings," I said, pulling the USB drive from my pocket and placing it on the table next to the jewelry. "Everything is on here. You can either come clean and stop this, or I'll make sure everyone knows what you've been doing." She looked down at the drive, then back at me. For a moment, I thought she was going to apologize, to try to make things right. But instead, she crossed her arms, her face hard as stone. "You're bluffing," she said. "You don't have the guts." I shook my head, disappointed but not surprised. "You think I'm bluffing? Go ahead. Test me. But don't come crying to me when your life falls apart." The tension in the room was thick. Emily stood there, staring at me, her mind clearly racing. I could see the wheels turning in her head, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. Before she could say anything, my phone buzzed. It was my dad, calling to let me know he'd be arriving soon with Emily's belongings. I had already arranged for her things to be packed and moved to Nancy's house. There was no point in dragging this out any longer. "I've already changed the locks at the house," I said, my voice cold. "If you forgot anything, let me know, and I'll get it for you. But as of tonight, you're out." Her mouth fell open, but she didn't say anything. She was too stunned. I pulled the final item out of my pocket, a small, gold ring. It was the ring she always wore on special occasions, a gift from me on our 10th anniversary. I placed it on the table next to the other jewelry and the USB drive. "I hope it was worth it, Emily," I said, standing up. "I really do." As I walked toward the door, she finally found her voice. "You're making a mistake, Ryan. This isn't over." I didn't turn around. "Yes, it is." Outside, my dad pulled up in his truck, and we quickly started unloading Emily's things. It only took about 10 minutes. Everything she had in the house was packed up and ready to go. As we worked, I could hear her inside, pacing back and forth, still shouting at me through the walls. But I didn't care anymore. Her words meant nothing to me now. By the time we finished, I felt lighter, like a weight had been lifted off my chest. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I woke up feeling a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, and an odd sense of peace. It was over. Emily was gone, and I was free to move on with my life. But at the same time, I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the anger that simmered just beneath the surface. She had destroyed everything we had built together, and for what? A fling with a coworker? Over the next few weeks, I began to rebuild my life. The kids adjusted quickly, and surprisingly, they didn't seem to miss Emily all that much. We spent more time together as a family, and they were thrilled whenever we visited Janet and her koi ponds. Janet and I had grown closer over the past few months, but there was no talk of romance yet. We were both focused on healing, on getting through our divorces and moving forward. But I couldn't deny that something was growing between us, something deeper than just shared pain. Emily, on the other hand, had completely disappeared. She didn't try to contact me or the kids, and from what I heard, she had followed Tom to Omaha after they were both fired from Liberty Insurance. But that didn't last long. A few months later, Tom vanished without a word, leaving Emily stranded. She eventually moved back in with her sister Nancy, who was going through her own divorce after Brad took a job in Alaska. It was poetic justice in a way. Emily and Nancy, both abandoned by the men they had tried to build their lives around. Meanwhile, I was moving on, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. The next few months went by in a blur. Emily was out of my life, and the kids and I were settling into a new routine. I was finally starting to feel like myself again, free from the weight of the lies and betrayal that had consumed me for so long. Meanwhile, things between Janet and me were slowly evolving. We didn't rush into anything, but we spent more time together, mostly with the kids, visiting her koi ponds or having dinner at her place. It was comforting, being around someone who understood exactly what I had been through, because she was going through the same thing. There was no need to explain the pain. We both felt it. One day, Janet called me with some unexpected news. "Ryan, I just found out that both Emily and Tom were fired from Liberty Insurance," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "Fired?" I asked, not sure how to react. "Why?" "Apparently, someone tipped off HR about their affair. There were complaints, and they both got the axe," she explained. "I guess karma finally caught up with them." I couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. Emily had tried to build a secret life, but it had come crashing down around her. Now, she was paying the price. Janet mentioned that Emily refused to sign the affidavit her lawyer had requested, but she assured me that it wouldn't affect the case. "We've got enough evidence without it," she said confidently. A few weeks later, my divorce was finalized. Emily didn't fight it. She didn't even show up to the court hearings. It was like she had disappeared from my life entirely. The kids didn't seem to miss her, and to be honest, neither did I. Janet's divorce from Tom, on the other hand, was messier. Tom fought it every step of the way, but in the end, he lost everything. The house, the investments, and even a good chunk of his monthly income, which now went to Janet in the form of alimony. I wasn't sorry for him. He had destroyed his marriage, and now he was paying the price for it. A few days before Christmas, Emily showed up at my house unexpectedly. It was the first time I had seen her since the divorce was finalized. She came with gifts for the kids, trying to play the part of the doting mother. I let her stay for a couple of hours, watching as she awkwardly interacted with Anna and Ethan. They were polite, but distant. They didn't seem to know what to make of her anymore. We didn't talk about the affair or the divorce. It was like none of it had happened. After she left, I felt an odd sense of closure. She had come and gone, and it didn't affect me at all. The house was already up for sale, and I was planning to move in with Janet by the end of the month. Tom, on the other hand, wasn't faring so well. He had taken a job out in Omaha, but just a few months later, he disappeared without a word. No one knew where he went, not even Emily. She ended up moving back in with Nancy, who was still reeling from her own divorce after Brad had left her to take a job on the Alaskan pipeline. It was strange how things had played out. Both Emily and Nancy had been abandoned by the men they had tried to build their lives around, while Janet and I were moving forward together. There was something poetic about it, like the universe had finally set things right. By June, Janet and I were planning our wedding. We had both moved past the trauma of our previous marriages and were ready to start fresh. The kids adored her, and they were thriving in this new, peaceful life we had built together. There was no more drama, no more deceit, just the simple joy of being with people who actually cared. We spent countless afternoons in Janet's backyard, watching the koi swim lazily in the ponds. It became our little sanctuary, a place where we could relax and forget about everything that had happened. The kids loved feeding the fish and naming them, treating them like part of the family. One day, Janet surprised me by showing me a 6-bedroom villa she had bought nearby with the money she had saved from selling her business. The house was stunning, with a large pool and plenty of space for the kids to run around. It felt like the perfect place to start our new life together. But that wasn't the only surprise she had up her sleeve. She had also kept my old Jaguar XK140 hidden in the garage, waiting for the right moment to show it to me. When she pulled the cover off, revealing the sleek, vintage car, I was speechless. I hadn't seen the car in years, and seeing it again brought back so many memories. We made plans to take the Jaguar out for a drive along the coast, stopping at a small French restaurant we both loved. It felt like the perfect way to celebrate how far we had come. After all the heartache and betrayal, we had finally found peace. As for Emily, I heard through the grapevine that she was still living with Nancy, trying to piece her life back together after Tom's betrayal. But that wasn't my concern anymore. I had moved on, ready to start a new chapter with Janet by my side. By the time summer rolled around, life had settled into a peaceful, happy routine. Janet and I were fully focused on building a future together, and the kids were thriving in this new chapter of their lives. There was no more tension, no more second-guessing, just a calm sense of relief that came from knowing the worst was behind us. One afternoon, Janet and I sat by the pool, watching the kids splash around while we talked about our upcoming wedding. It was going to be a small, intimate ceremony, just us, the kids, and a few close friends. After everything we had been through, a big, flashy wedding didn't seem right. We wanted something simple, something that reflected the quiet happiness we had found. As we talked, I couldn't help but think about how different my life was now compared to just a year ago. Back then, I was consumed by suspicion and anger, trapped in a marriage that was crumbling around me. Now, sitting here with Janet, I felt free. Free to be happy, free to move forward without the weight of the past dragging me down. A few days later, as we were finalizing the wedding details, Janet received some unexpected news. Word had gotten around that Tom had been mugged outside a bar in Omaha. The attackers had beaten him pretty badly. Broken ribs, busted kneecaps, even some missing teeth. He had lost his wallet in the attack, but the real kicker was that he'd also lost one of his testicles. It seemed karma had finally caught up with him in a big way. When Janet told me about it, I couldn't help but laugh. I didn't revel in his pain, but after everything he had done, it was hard not to see it as some sort of cosmic justice. Tom had wrecked our lives, and now the universe had decided to even the score. I guess that's what happens when you play with fire, I said, shaking my head. It eventually burns you. Janet smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. It's hard to believe that he's the same person I married, she said quietly. I don't even recognize him anymore. I understood what she meant. The Tom she had once loved was gone, replaced by someone who had thrown away everything they had built together. It was a sobering reminder of how far we had both come, and how lucky we were to have found each other in the aftermath. As summer came to an end, we were gearing up for the wedding. The house was buzzing with excitement, and the kids were counting down the days. Janet and I were ready to start this new chapter together, and for the first time in a long time, everything felt right. A few weeks before the wedding, Janet surprised me again. She had arranged for a weekend getaway at a beautiful seaside villa, just the two of us. It was going to be our chance to relax and unwind before the big day, and I couldn't have been more thrilled. When we arrived at the villa, it was even more stunning than I had imagined. The views of the ocean were breathtaking, and the house itself was perfect, a luxurious escape from the world. We spent our days lounging by the pool, taking long walks along the beach, and enjoying each other's company without any of the distractions of daily life. On the last night of our stay, Janet and I took the Jaguar out for a drive along the coast. The sun was setting, casting a warm golden glow over the ocean, and the salty breeze whipped through the open windows as we sped down the winding roads. It It was the kind of moment I had dreamed about during all those dark months. Just the two of us, free from the weight of the past, looking forward to a future that felt full of possibility. We stopped at our favorite French restaurant for dinner, the same one we had visited years ago, back when our lives were much more complicated. As we sat there, toasting to everything we had overcome, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the second chance we had been given, for the love we had found in each other, and for the life we were about to build together. As for Emily, she had faded into the background of my life, just a distant memory of a time that no longer felt relevant. I hadn't heard from her in months, and from what I knew, she was still living with Nancy, trying to put the pieces of her life back together after Tom's betrayal. But that was her problem now, not mine. I had moved on, and so had Janet. We were ready for whatever the future held, and we were both more than willing to embrace it together. The wedding day came sooner than I expected, and as I stood there, watching Janet walk down the aisle, I couldn't help but feel overwhelmed with emotion. She looked stunning, radiating happiness, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt like everything in my life was exactly where it needed to be. The ceremony was small and intimate, just as we had planned. The kids stood by our sides, grinning from ear to ear, and our closest friends looked on as Janet and I exchanged vows. There were no grand speeches, no extravagant displays. Just us, committing to the life we had built together and promising to keep moving forward, no matter what. After the ceremony, we all gathered for a quiet reception in Janet's backyard. The koi ponds shimmered under the evening light, and the air was filled with laughter and the sounds of kids playing. It was the kind of peace I had longed for, and now, I finally had it. As we settled into our new life as husband and wife, everything started to fall into place. The kids adored Janet, and the transition to living together had been seamless. We spent our days planning trips, making new memories, and enjoying the simple joys that came with our newfound happiness. Every now and then, I would think back to the dark times, the months of suspicion, the painful discoveries, the endless anger, but they felt so distant now, like a bad dream I had finally woken up from. Janet had helped me heal, and in turn, I had helped her. We had saved each other from the wreckage of our past lives, and now, we were building something far better than anything we had before. One afternoon, while we were cleaning out the garage, Janet found a box of old pictures from her previous life with Tom. She hesitated for a moment before opening it, flipping through the memories of a marriage that had long since crumbled. "I thought about throwing these away after everything that happened," she admitted, her voice soft, "but I think I'll keep them. Not because I missed that life, but because it reminds me of how far I've come." I understood what she meant. I had done the same with the remnants of my marriage to Emily. It wasn't about holding on to the past. It was about recognizing how much stronger we were now. We tucked the box away in the attic, out of sight but not completely forgotten. After all, those memories were part of our story, even if they were no longer the defining chapters. As for Emily, she had become nothing more than a passing thought. I hadn't heard from her since the Christmas visit, and from what I gathered, she was still living with Nancy, struggling to rebuild her life after Tom had disappeared. It seemed fitting, in a way. Emily and Nancy, both abandoned by the men they had once relied on, left to pick up the pieces of the lives they had tried to control. But that was all in the past now. I didn't hold any anger toward Emily anymore. In fact, I felt a strange sense of peace when I thought about her. She had made her choices, and I had made mine. And in the end, I had come out stronger. Tom, on the other hand, had gotten what was coming to him. Word around town was that after the mugging, he had spiraled into debt and was living in some rundown apartment, barely scraping by. It was hard to feel sorry for him. He had destroyed 2 marriages and countless lives along the way, and now, he was paying the price for his reckless actions. Karma, as they say, has a way of catching up with people. By the time autumn rolled around, Janet and I had fully settled into our new routine. The kids were doing great in school, and we had just finished renovating the villa we had moved into. Life was finally the way it was meant to be, calm, happy, and free of drama. One evening, as we sat by the pool, watching the koi swim lazily in the twilight, Janet turned to me with a smile. "You know, I never thought I'd find happiness again," she said. her voice soft. But here we are. I took her hand, squeezing it gently. Yeah, I agreed, feeling the warmth of her touch. Here we are. We sat there in silence for a while, just enjoying the moment. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. And after everything we had been through, that was more than enough.